Our second last speaker is Murray Scholz. Murray and his wife Emma farm at Culcairn in southern New South Wales, producing wheat, canola, barley and beef cattle. Murray has an interest in the use of management and technology to make agricultural systems more sustainable and resilient. In 2011, he was one of the first Australians to graduate from the Executive Program for Agricultural Producers, which is run by Texas A&M University. Murray was awarded a Nuffield Scholarship in 2008, looking at the sustainability of weed management systems, especially herbicide-tolerant, genetically modified crops. He was presented at the International Weed Science Congress and the Australian Institute of Agricultural Science and Technology. He is also a member of the NFF Blueprint for Agriculture Review Panel. Murray.
Thank you very much. They asked me to talk today to you about how we use technology on our farm and how we utilise technology to make more from less. So our farm is about a bit over 4,000 acres, which is at Culcairn, which is, for you that don't know, 60 k's north of Albury. We're in the foothills of the Great Dividing Range. Our family's farmed in the Henty-Culcairn district for nearly 100 years. And we grow 1,200 hectares of crop on our farm that's continuous cropping. We've been doing that since the early 80s. My father started direct drilling in the late 70s. And we went to full no-till sometime in the mid-80s. We didn't write down when we did that. It just was a natural progression. A quarter of the farm is non-arable, and so we run beef cattle on it. I don't like sheep. And so cattle fit our system quite well. We don't run the cattle on the cropping country whenever it's wet. We will graze the cropping country through the summer, but not when it's wet, and certainly not through the winter. So the constraints that our business has is like most other farming businesses, is time. There's never enough water, and when you're busy, there's never enough labour. So you might gather by the picture, I'm a technology junkie. We have a 2 centimetre base station on our property. We've been using variable rate line for the last couple of years. We've got a seeder that has precision seeding depth. We've been yield mapping since 2003, and like Andrew was saying, the most useful part for us is that ability to monitor your own farm trials. Our boom spray's got auto height control, auto section control, and we do electronic record keeping. I've been keeping farm records on the computer since 1995. So, precision seeding. Our seeder uses a parallelogram system, which means it uses a press wheel to accurately place the seed at the same depth over the machine. And it's a great advantage to us, we think, because it means that you have a much better germination rate. The crop, it's fantastic. You drive past a paddock in the morning and there's not a plant up, and you come back in the afternoon and nearly every single plant has emerged, which means that you get a very even crop. Means it's much easier to manage. As the season progresses, the crop tends to stay at the same maturity pattern. So when you're doing, say, a stripe rust treatment, you've got the flag leaf emerging all together at the same time over the paddock. Research out of Canada suggests that with our old seeder, we were getting plants germinating over, say, a 10-day period. And research out of Canada suggests that a lot of those plants that germinate after even 3 days compared to the first one, their yield potential drops dramatically. And the ones that are coming up 7 days after are actually turning into weeds because they're always behind and they're actually competing with the stronger, bigger plants for moisture and nutrient. The 2 centimetre auto steer lets us inter-row sow. And so that means, if you're not familiar, we go back and shift where we plant by halfway between our row spacing. Our row spacing is 12 inches, and so we shift over 15 centimetres or 6 inches every year. That gives us the opportunity to plant a plant into soil that hasn't grown anything for the last 12 months. So it's got a mini fallow effect, It lets us keep more residue, which helps make a microclimate, makes life more difficult for the weeds because they're growing in where the residue is. And yeah, it just makes life a lot easier. We've been getting Andrew to do soil pH testing for us. We got into it after the drought because in droughts, lime's probably one of the easiest things to knock off the budget when you haven't got any money, because you know the effects long term, and so it's much easier to put your head in the sand and say, I won't spend the money. And so we really wanted to, because we had limited budget to spend on lime, we really wanted to maximise the potential. And this is a picture of a paddock that Andrew tested for us. It's 45 hectares. So as you can see with that, there's 45 hectares. That 5 hectare patch is quite acid. The rest of the paddock isn't too bad. Now that paddock, we would have, if we hadn't pH tested it, we would have said, okay, that paddock needs 90 tonne of lime, and we just would have put a blanket application of 90 tonne of lime on. Instead, after we mapped it, we went back to that red patch and we put 3 tonne to the hectare on that, and so we used 15 tonne. 15 tonne. So it was a massive savings for the budget. We tested 400 hectares the first year, and I would have budgeted to use 800 tonne of lime, and I did the whole lot in under 400 tonne. It's been so good for us that this coming winter, I'm actually going to get Andrew to test the rest of the farm that we haven't tested and limed, simply because even though I've got more money to spend on lime because we've had some better years, that red patch, if I'd put the 2 hectares a tonne over the whole paddock, that red patch would still be more acid than the rest of the paddock. It still would have been a constraint. So therefore, even if it means I'm going to have to spend more money because I've got patches that are more acid than I want, it's better off because I know I'm going to be able to get to it. And by doing the whole farm in one hit, I know exactly where the problems are instead of trying to guess. So with variable rate lime, you think we might have a big fancy lime spreader that's got a set of scales that does variable rate on the go. I'm afraid not. We've only got a 20-year-old lime spreader. Andrew made that map and available to the screen for the GPS in the tractor, and all I had to do was colour it in. It was really simple, didn't cost very much, a very useful and cost-effective way of using the technology. As I said earlier, we've been keeping computer records since 1995. The reason I started doing it was to do the gross margins, and over time it's developed into this massive database that's really useful. Often I don't use a lot of the information that's in the database, but because it's there, I have the ability to go back and look at it. I can find out what my gross margin is over a rotation. So I can compare 2 different rotations over a 5 or 10 year period. I can go back at over 20 years and look at it and say, this paddock has made maybe 15% of all my profit over all that time. So therefore I really should be, or alternatively, this paddock has been losing me money consistently over time, you know, and so I take it out of cropping and put it back into pasture. These days, the program I use has now got an app on the iPad, so I've got all those records with me in the paddock. I have an employee, he's also got an iPad. Whenever he does anything now, he puts it into his iPad. Saves him having to write notes, which he hated doing. So I'm getting better and more accurate records. He's doing it much quicker, so he's happier. I download it every night, it only takes a minute. I upload it up into mine. I instantly know what he's done, what the paddock's been sprayed with. If I'm moving a mob of cattle and I'm wondering whether the paddock's still in a withholding period, 2 seconds to check. It makes life considerably easier. The beauty of having the iPad with me all the time, I'm now connected to the internet. With the marketing of grain the way it is these days, it's constantly changing. So what was happening at 9 o'clock in the morning may be totally different 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's all year round. I haven't got the time to be spending all day in the office looking to see what's happened. The other great thing that has happened with it is the ability to have a library with you. I've got 3 or 4 parts books in the iPad. I can look up chemical labels. I can look up almost anything that's on the web, as long as I've got connectivity, which is a bit of an issue, but we won't go there. But yeah, it gives you that ability to access knowledge quickly and not waste time, because time is really important. You know, that 4,000 acres that we farm, when I came home from school, there were 7 people working on that. Today, there's only 3. And a lot of people would say we're overstaffed. So, does all this fancy technology pay? Well, it's really hard to put a cash value on it. It's hard to put a value on being able to go home at the end of the day not feeling like you've run a marathon, or to be able to go out in the middle of the night and spray and know that you're doing it accurately. We're certainly using less fertiliser. The lime has been a huge saving. It's probably helped pay for the GPS system almost in the first year. We used to say round and round, and we now go up and back with the auto steer, and that cut our fertiliser by 10% in one hit. It certainly minimises our overlaps and misses. There's no point going out when you're spraying a crop, giving it a double dose of herbicide, and it's also just as pointless missing a patch and leaving the weeds to grow and keep the seed bank going. All that information that we store helps make better decisions. Because we often don't think about it, but our farms are systems. And we build quite complicated and difficult systems to manage. And so if you've got information that helps make you better decisions, it makes life a lot easier and hopefully your business more profitable. We also use lots of technology that isn't glamorous, that you don't have to go spend a fortune to buy. Simple things that are management techniques. Timeliness of sowing. You know, every day you go past the optimum sowing date, you start losing yield. Summer weed control has been a major change in our farm business over the last 3 years. Huge impact. And this last year we did some green or brown manuring, whatever you want to call it, for the first time. So for us, the value of conserving summer moisture is huge. We go out and probably spray, depending on the summer. This summer was great, but I only had to do it once. Last summer, where we were getting all that rain, we had to do it, some paddocks we had to spray up to 5 times. But having all that water stored means that we can go sow by the calendar. We don't have to sit and wait for a rain event to start our autumn sowing program. And by doing that, that increases our water use efficiency. Water use efficiency, for me, is my strategy to make my business profitable. CSIRO have done quite a bit of work, and they believe that for summer spraying, the average return from every dollar you spend is $8 back. And this is a lot of information there, but this is from an app called Climate, which is funded by GRDC. It's free, and it's got a huge number of places all over Australia in it. So if you can get it, and you can go in and have a look at your own data. And this shows the importance of storing that summer moisture so you can start planting in the autumn when you want to. Here we're showing Culcairn, and we're asking it, how often do we get 25 millimetres of rain in a 10-day period through April and May? And if you look, it says that we get it 80% of the time. And these are the years that that's happened in blue. Quite interesting to note, there's year 2000. It's not happening near as often. 25 mils in my book is the minimum that you need to start cropping. If you haven't had that, you're really probably too dry. And ideally, you'd like 50 mils. So if we ask it how often does that happen, it's actually only 34% of the time. And what's really interesting is, if we look at the year 2000, it hasn't happened. So if you've got no stored soil moisture because you've let your summer weeds use all your moisture and some of your nutrient, you're a bit behind the 8 ball because we're not getting those autumn breaks like we have been. This is work that CSIRO did with James Hunt and John Kierkegaard. There's a lot of information here, but if you look, they did, this is modelling that shows at Yarrawonga. So this is how much water was in the soil where they didn't do any summer spraying, so 19 millimetres. With the summer spraying, there was 49. The grain yield without any summer spraying was 2.1 tonnes to the hectare. With was 3.6. So the water use efficiency, which is the kilograms of hectare per millimetre, minus transpiration, evaporation, runoff and drainage, was only 6 kilos of millimetre. With the same amount of millimetres of rain, they're producing 10, which is 65% more grain. That's quite a significant amount more grain for the same amount of water. It's not going to work every year, but in this part of the world, at Yarrawonga, at least 8 years out of 10, it's worthwhile doing. The higher the rainfall, it seems to be more 9 years out of 10. Summer spraying isn't cheap. It costs us at least $30 a hectare a year. But in this research, it's showing that they're getting an extra $348 a hectare income, minus their costs of $315, which is $10 back for every dollar they spent in the summer. For us, it's just a no-brainer. It's been one of the most important changes we've made in our business. The other thing we've started trialling is green manure. That's a crop of lupins that I planted last autumn. It's my 9-year-old daughter standing there, and the day after we took that photo, we went in there and nuked it. Probably the best crop of lupins I've ever grown. It had no inputs whatsoever, and my father nearly cried as I was driving in with the boom spray. And I'd hoped to get a photo to show you what it looked like today. It's about 2 inches high, and we sowed it with canola on Sunday. The reason why we're looking at green manure is with one of the issues you get from continuous cropping is herbicide-resistant weeds. And so one of the strategies we're looking at is trialling green manure so that you go in, you take out those weeds totally last year. We're going to hit them quite hard again this year with a canola crop so that you're getting that 2-year sort of really to knock your seed bank right down. And okay, you're not getting any income because it's, in fact, it's cost you money, but at the same time, you're getting quite a bit of nitrogen. Mark Day at Lockhart's been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and he's saying that he's growing a crop of green manure, then a canola crop, and then 2 wheat crops. He's virtually needing no nitrogen in the canola crop or the first wheat crop, and no herbicides in either of the wheat crops. That's quite a significant saving. I have a feeling that if you look at it over a 4 or 5 year rotation, the gross margin's probably going to come down lower with the green manure. But the big advantage that I could see is possibly that the risk is considerably lower as well. You know, if you're not having to fork out all that money when you get a drought year, it doesn't hurt near as badly. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We're going to monitor it through for the next 4 or 5 years. This year I'll be trialling a paddock where I'll green manure half and harvest the other half. And then I'll follow it through for the next 4 or 5 years and see what happens with both the weed management and the gross margin. And it'll probably be 5 years before we know whether it's something we're going to keep doing. But I think the more marginal region you are, the more potential this has to lower your risk and make your system more sustainable. So, where do I see technology going in the future? Well, for us, a lot of this stuff is already available. It's probably just not, just out of my reach probably because I don't want to spend the money yet. But things like ground moisture monitors match with yield profit. So I know exactly how much moisture is in the soil so that when I'm doing those spring nitrogen applications, I'm putting on the amount that I know I'm going to grow. No point putting out nitrogen if there's not enough moisture to grow the crop. I can see us using green seekers matched with a nitrogen spreader that does variable rate and section control. Again, targeting the nitrogen for where we really need it. As Andrew was saying, drones for crop monitoring, I think that's not that far away. I was at a conference recently where they were saying about GPS monitoring of cattle. It's now possible to buy a GPS receiver for a cow for about $10 a head. And it hasn't been commercialised yet, but I can see the day within 2 or 3 years where there'll be a service available where you get an SMS to say cow Y123 has started calving. Now, if you've got a heap of heifers, that'd be fantastic. You only have to go check her a couple of hours later. She hasn't had the calf, you get her in straight away. You're not wasting time, going back constantly, disturbing her, slowing her down. More chance of getting a live calf. Same sort of technology tells you that if their water's the problem with their water, they're all going to start walking a lot. Or if they're running out of feed, you can see that livestock's movement, they drop away. So simple stuff that lets you leave the cattle alone, but be able to monitor them a lot better. And what else is coming? Who knows? When I bought my first smartphone 5 years ago, if you'd told me that in 5 years, or it was only 3 years actually, I've had it for 2 years now, that I'd have an app that I could take a photo of my canola crop and it'd tell me the green area index or how much nitrogen the plant's got in it, I would have looked at you like you're nuts. I'm sure the people at Apple, when they developed smartphones, they weren't really worried about nitrogen content of canola. So there's lots of smart people out there with clever ideas, and I think a lot of this technology that's being developed for other uses is slowly going to come over into agriculture, and in theory it's going to make our life easier and hopefully make us produce more from less. Thank you.